Hello and welcome to the We All Follow podcast. My name is Matt Fox. I am your host. Today we are back. It's a FA Cup week. It's a domestic week. Nigel, tell the people to follow us on X at We All Follow Pod. Tell them.
Yeah, follow us on X at We All Follow Pod, or follow us on Instagram at We All Follow Pod, and have a look for our individual accounts. They're at Big Match Pro AFC, at Nigel_B_golf, and obviously our guest who was on his way in, at Ben_Mattinson_.
That's right. That's where you can find us, the good people. Nigel, it's been a week. It's been a week. What is your moment of the week?
Yeah, this is a bit tricky, really, because it's been two sticky games for my team, or has it? So my moment of the week is the 93rd minute of the Supercoppa Italia in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, and AC Milano digging out a 3-2 win against Inter in the Supercoppa Italia, and Sergio Conceição pulling out his big chug, and doing his little dance in the dressing room. So that's my moment of the week. AC Milan 2-0 down, 3-2 winners, Supercoppa Italia, Sergio Conceição, 2 games, 2 wins, 1 trophy. He's got him playing.
Friend of the show and American.
Friend of the show.
Christian Pulisic coming up big.
Yes, he did. Tammy Abraham came on 78th minute, change again. Absolutely change again. So yeah.
I'll tell you, there's nothing like a Milan derby in Saudi Arabia.
In front of, I mean,
17 people.
Do you know this is? So I put this out on my X only a couple of weeks ago, to be fair, and it was after Arteta got asked that question about how many trophies have you won. He said 3, and everyone went 3, and he went, "Yeah, I've won 2 Community Shields and 1 FA Cup." And everyone went, "Community Shield's not a trophy," and I put on my X, if the Community Shield was called the English Super Cup, would that change fans' perception of how that trophy is viewed? And overwhelmingly, people said, yeah. If it was called a Super Cup, I think people it would mean something. It is a Super Cup. So the Italian Super Cup, Spanish Super Cup, yeah, they all Germany do it as well. The DFB, the Pokal Super Cup. This is all it is exactly the same as the Community Shield. It's just called something different. So yeah, the Supercoppa Italia celebrated in huge style for AC Milano. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, the Super Cup thing is definitely it's definitely real. And I always think it's funny because fans are like, well, other teams don't celebrate it. And I don't know if you saw when Toni Kroos was retiring from Madrid. He had a photo with all the trophies he had won, and all of the Super Cups were up there, the domestic ones and the UEFA ones, right? And it's like, obviously it's not made up, right? It's a legitimate win. But that being said, I think that leads us into my moment of the week, which is, believe it or not, it is not Mo Salah. It's not. He's been on a run. He's been on a run. But we have a new friend of the show, Alexander Isak, who scored 2 goals this week. One in a 2-1 win over Tottenham Hotspur, and another goal against our beloved Arsenal. And the goal in the Arsenal game, it wasn't the most beautiful piece of striker work, right? The point of this was that it was everything else that he did during that game, right? It was everything else that he did in terms of the way that he makes his runs, the way that he carries the ball, the way that he takes on defenders, the way that he is kind of like this hub of activity, right? He doesn't always drop deep to do it either, right? He's collecting the ball in the middle of the opposition half, and then he's kicking it all different places and spreading it out like a 10, right? And then he's also where he's supposed to be in the box on the plays to make opportunities to score, right? And whether he has the goal in the first one that was obviously a botched defensive play, or the second one where he's in a boatload of space, right? He takes a hard shot from a good position, and it's parried, and his teammate is there to get the goal. And so, yeah, that's for me. My moment of the week was Alexander Isak, or my player of the week is Alexander Isak, who's been on a wonderful run of form. And I was listening to the boys over at Arsenal Vision. They do their like post-match podcasts. Plug them. They're great. They're awesome. Paul, one of the guys on the podcast, was talking about when you're preparing for the game, who are you fearing, right? And if you're game planning for Arsenal, what of their forwards are you fearing right now? And the reality is you're not fearing any of them, right? And on the other side, if you're playing Newcastle, you are fearing Isak and Gordon, right? Both of those guys are guys who you have to make specific game plans for. And as you saw at the game at St. James's Park a couple weeks ago, right? It was a Gordon cross into an Isak header, right? And so like these are game-changing players and moment-making players that make the difference in the big matches. Obviously there's a lot to unpack on the Arsenal Newcastle game. Obviously, there was also the other semifinal first leg, which was Spurs 1, Liverpool 0, which was also a pretty entertaining match. I got to watch a fair amount of it. EFL Cup semifinals first leg. What do you got for me?
I don't think Arsenal are out of it. That's the thing. Even at 2-0 down, I don't think we're out of it because they go to St. James's and get one goal. All of a sudden, things change. It starts to become nervy. You get a second goal, and it's real nervy. I don't think we're out of it. I don't think Arsenal are out of it. I think that they were their own worst enemy in that first game. Both goals completely avoidable. It was... God. Even worse than that was the 7 big chances missed by Arsenal. I mean, score half of them, you've won the game easy. The worst bit was the fact that 2 of the big chances missed came before they had even scored their goal. The Martinelli chance where he was at the post and a timber header from 1 yard out, what he's managed to put over the bar. I mean, yeah, I don't know how he did that. We then had the Declan Rice chance where he shot and Botman blocked it, and we had the Gabriel volley chance where what hit Dubravka in the chest. We could have been 4-1 up at half time. That's a reality of it. Should have been 4-1 up at half time. And the Kai miss in the second half was a joke. I think Manan could score that with her eyes closed. And she's been dead 11 years. So yeah, that's the crux of it. It was just awesome. I cannot believe that on the same day last year, we lost 2-0 at home to Liverpool. So on the 7th of January, 2024, we lost 2-0 at home to Liverpool in the FA Cup. Had an unbelievable amount of big chances missed in that game. It was ridiculous. And came away with nothing. And we've done exactly the same on the same day against Newcastle this year. Just a different cup competition.
Welcome back to the show. We were just in the middle of talking about the Arsenal-Newcastle game. Alexander Isak was my moment of the week for his performances, both in the Premier League as well as the EFL Cup. We're starting to dig into the match. my question for you, really from a player evaluation standpoint, is because I was talking about how the goal of Isak was irrelevant, but it was the way that he was making runs, the way he was receiving the ball, kind of in the number 10 spot, pinging the ball left, right, everywhere, taking on players. There was one point where he absolutely dusted William Saliba. Admittedly, Saliba went in for a challenge and was trying to sneak the ball away from him. But either way, it looked awful. When you look at a player like that, what stands out to you from your perspective on a talent like Isak?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. The thing is, he's so technical for such a big player, but he's got that, like, the thing is, a lot of those really tall players like that are so slim, you think are going to be quite lightweight, but he kind of uses his body really well, and he's got a bit of an aggression about him and quite a like cockiness as well, which is really good. Like, even the goal itself, he got that because he just pushed Odegaard out of the way. He literally just pushed him from behind and then got the extra space to just tap it in. And Odegaard should have been stronger. It's not really a foul. It's not good enough awareness to see him right behind him and leave their top goal scorer completely open behind you. But yeah, just that general thing of him of like, he could run with the ball with doing kick-ups like Henry or whatever, but at the same time could then push someone out of the way. And he's just got everything to his game. And even he's not like, for someone that big, he's not amazing in the air compared to like, let's say, Osimhen or someone like that, but he's still good at that as well. And his movement is the main thing. So yeah, but the hopes of him at Arsenal, they've gone for me. I can't see it happening. I can't see Newcastle getting rid of him.
Yeah, I think that's an unlikely scenario unless you pay over the odds for him. That being said, Nigel, you mentioned the 0-2 game against Liverpool last year in the FA Cup. I think that this one was way more like the 0-2 game against West Ham that honestly fomented a lot of the same feelings in the fan base as this game did, which was lying bare the underlying issues that have been there for some time, right? Which is the clinicality and the ability to finish your chances, right? And in that game, what the biggest similarity to me in that game to this game, aside from the overwhelming XG in the game, which honestly, a lot of that was provided by the game state in both of those games, both games where they were 2-0 up and then they sat back and allowed chances. But more importantly, what I was saying about the players that you fear, right? And in that game, West Ham had Kudus and Jared Bowen up front. And in this one, they had Anthony Gordon and Alexander Isak. And I think you can argue about the quality of those players on some level. All of them are really top forwards in their position. I would argue they could those players could fight for a starting position in Champions League place teams. And ultimately, those players make the difference.
I mean, I'm not going to disagree. I think Anthony Gordon probably is the best left winger in the league at the moment. So that doesn't change for me. I think he's danger. The worst bit of that game was two horrendous pieces of defending. To be fair, Timber fell asleep for Gordon's goal. Odegaard asleep and too weak for Isaac's goal. It was poor.
So obviously there's a lot of frustration online. There was a lot of frustration in the stadium yesterday from accounts of folks that I've heard. Obviously the cup games, it's a little bit of a different audience where there has been so many games this season that season ticket holders and the like, people like you, Nigel, aren't going to make the trip down for some of those games. Just, ultimately the cost of those matches, train tickets, food, beer, all of that adds up, and it somewhat becomes unsustainable even for people who make a really good living, let alone people who are struggling in this cost of living crisis. There's more matches. Last year, I think Arsenal had 3 matches in January. This year, they have 9. let's talk about it. Let's talk about the fixture congestion as it relates to what that means in a month where a team is obviously struggling. And struggling. I mean, yes, they won 2 matches ago, but the performances that are underlying these results are not great.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'm not in panic stations yet. I've not hit the red button. Put it that way. But it all hinges on Sunday. Genuinely hinges on Sunday, because good result on Sunday against Man United in the FA Cup, you're through to the next round, and we're going to Wednesday against Spurs, and Spurs are going to be missing so many players at home. We're virtually, Spurs are virtually going to have an entirely new back line and goalie and half a midfield, and we've got to go into that North London derby on Wednesday with some confidence. So I expect a change on Sunday. I expect a change of mood on Sunday. And I expect them to do something on Wednesday. And after Wednesday, it then becomes a little bit easier, because the 2 Champions League games what we've got to play, let's just say one's away, one's at home. Both of them are, if we don't win them, then there's something wrong. We should be beating Dinamo at home. We should be beating Girona away. And yeah, there's something in the air what says, are Arsenal going to do any business? And if we do some business, then it could change everything. And if we don't do any business, then we could all be sat here in May saying, why? And that's it.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done over the next couple of weeks and through the end of the month. There's a lot of games to get through before that happens. Ben, I know you've been looking at some different players. There's been some rumors today. Kvaratskhelia was the rumor came out about him going to PSG. And Ornstein came out saying that Liverpool and Chelsea are also interested in him. Do you think that that's a player that Arsenal should be targeting?
The player of that caliber, that type of reputation, I'm not sure if he's the perfect. If you were going to get a left wing for us, I don't know if he's the perfect profile. But at the same time, when you look at the wingers that we have and how we play, and what Arteta wants from the wingers, I'm surprised that we're not really even a name that's mentioned there. But at one point I was thinking, if he's going to PSG, maybe that opens up possibility of someone like Barcola or Desiree Doué or someone like that being available. But if he then goes to the Premier League, then that's not really the case. So yeah, and it's weird how we're at a point where, I don't know, it feels like it's very frustrating and a bit deflating with all the transfer news, because it feels like we were here, City were there, and we were here, almost catching them, and we've slowly gone like that. City that, and then City are doing loads to get there, and everyone else has gone here. And if anything, it feels like they're not getting all the stuff in the media about, we don't play attractive football. The things that don't add context to it on the media of we've got loads of our players missing or anything like that. It's just about, we're not playing well, we're only focused on set pieces, blah blah blah. So if you're a player from the outside thinking, I could go to Chelsea where they're going to pay me even more probably, and then on top of that they're also going to be maybe getting in the Champions League, or they're also in the top in London, blah blah blah, all of that, you start to think, is Arsenal's project as lucrative as it looked before when they're trying to negotiate for these deals? And also a lot of these teams tend to pay up quite quickly. Even the deals that we did do in the summer, there was a lot of stuff about Calafiori, even Real Madrid were interested at one point and they were going to come in, and that rushed us along with the deal. So, you know, even the ones that we did get, we almost didn't. So it's frustrating, but I can't see maybe something small if Arsenal are going to do something, but realistically, they should be doing a lot more than Liverpool or Chelsea. The other teams that are being linked with Kvaratskhelia, I mean, I think Newcastle was the other one as well. I don't know if they would be able to afford him because they had to get rid of people in the summer just for PSR. But that would I said to someone, I think that front line, if they got him with Gordon and Isak, maybe the second best in the world, maybe third. Barcelona number one probably. Then Real Madrid, but Real Madrid doesn't really work. The front line doesn't properly work right now. Whereas that would be scary. But yeah, let's see.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you said, one of the biggest predictors of league finish is payroll, right? Is your wage packet as a club, right? And right now you have Man City on 200 million a year, Man United at 185. Obviously, we know the Man United issues. Then Arsenal at 172, Chelsea at 169, and then the drop off is pretty precipitous to 128 at Liverpool, right? But you're right, Ben. When you're talking about Arsenal, Chelsea, you're talking about two clubs that will pay the wages, that are both in London. You know, both projects that are relatively attractive if you're a player coming from the outside, with teams that are making investment, teams that are going to be challenging for Europe, teams that are ultimately points apart in the table, and it's going to be who's going to fork out the funds. And, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, Chelsea has shown and demonstrated that they're willing to put up the transfer fees basically over and over in order to get in the players that they want. So yeah, I'm not super optimistic about this transfer window from an Arsenal perspective. I think it's going to get more uncomfortable before it gets better. You know, does that mean that we can't make a comeback and end up winning the tie against Newcastle? No, but I definitely think that when you're not bringing in that new energy, it's going to be an uphill battle with the amount of injuries that we have ultimately. And I think if I told either of you guys at the beginning of the season that Odegaard was going to be out for almost 3 months and that Saka was going to be out for 3 to 4 months, then I asked you where we were going to finish in the table, I don't think either of you guys would have said that we were going to win the league.
No, I agree. I 100% agree.
So I think that brings us up to the table. Let's take a look at the table right now. After last week's results, Liverpool with a draw against Man U at home. So they're on 46. Arsenal remain in second, but on goal difference. Forest in third, followed by Chelsea, Newcastle, and Man City. I think at this point, it kind of looks like the fight is going to be for obviously, assuming that Forest is going to keep up the pace. The fight really looks like it's going to be for fourth between those three teams that are in that zone, or four teams really, with Chelsea, Newcastle, Man City, and Bournemouth tight to each other. Obviously, Aston Villa is going to put their hat in the ring on that one as well. Then we have Fulham, Brighton, Brentford, Spurs in 12th after another loss. Their form has not been great. Man United also continuing to drag along the bottom, but getting a well-deserved and important result for them, I think, on the confidence-building side of things, up at Anfield. Then you have West Ham, who have just changed their manager. They're going to be bringing in Graham Potter. That was announced today. Palace, Everton, and Wolves are rounding out the teams that are above the drop zone. Ipswich, Leicester, and Southampton in the relegation zone. So, Nigel, you're the one who tends to do an over 10,000 foot analysis on the table.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with what I was saying last time, and that is, if you're a Southampton or Leicester fan, you might as well start booking your championship tickets now. I said Rude was a decent. Rude should have stayed at Man U. both teams, Man U and Leicester, would have been in a better position if they'd have stuck with the people who they had in charge in November. If Leicester still had Steve Cooper, they wouldn't have lost 5 on the spin. If Man United would have stuck with Ruud van Nistelrooy, they wouldn't be the 4th worst team on form in the league. Simple. Man United wouldn't have lost, drawn as many games what they have done. Leicester wouldn't have lost the games what they have. And I think that was a faux pas by both parties. Further to this, and I said this last week, I said if Brentford get a win, I expected Tottenham to drop points at the weekend, which we did. I said if Brentford get a win, then that pushes them 3 points clear of Spurs and 4 clear of Man U. At that point, if you're Tottenham, you, especially the owners, Mr. Levy, etc., you are now looking at that table thinking there is a very, very, very slim chance now that we can even get anywhere towards Europe for next season. And at that point, you start looking at pound signs. How much is this going to cost us if we miss out on Europe? Because you miss out on Europe, you miss out on the funds, you miss out on players who want to play in Europe, they don't want to not play in Europe. You're then probably going to have to change your manager, which means that you've got to pay him off, which then costs you a lot of pound notes. Yeah. So this is where the league table starts really, really putting pressure, not on the managers, but also on boards and ownership. And I would be particularly worried now if I'm a Man United or Tottenham fan, because I believe that West Ham, Crystal Palace and Everton, even though Everton are 7 points behind Spurs, new change of manager, Sean Dyche has gone. There is 2 pretty good standout candidates for that job from what the rumours are around the Friedkin group. I'd be worried about these teams coming up. Potter will get West Ham playing. He's a perfect fit for West Ham. He will get them playing. Glasner's got Palace firing all of a sudden without Wharton, which was a surprise. I thought we'd struggle without Wharton, but we have managed to start getting it going. And I expect Everton to come up strong.
Wolves have been good.
Yeah, I don't think that
Wolves
Spurs have gotten any favors. You know, they have their FA Cup tie, obviously, against Tamworth, but then they go to the Emirates in the midweek game, and that's followed by a trip up to Goodison Park against with a new manager. They could be playing a totally different type of game in just a few weeks' time on the 19th, 10 days from now, when Spurs head up there. So, again, it could get worse before it gets better. Ben, Graham Potter in at West Ham, you've been probably one of the more vocal critics of Lopetegui on this show and Jenna, honestly, of the coaching or lack thereof that he does. How do you think Graham Potter steps in at West Ham? What changes does he make? How does he put his stamp on the team, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I'm always a bit torn with Potter as a manager. I really liked him for the England job. I thought it was a really good job for him. But I think from a club's point of view, because he would always change the team so much, there wasn't a lot of defensive solidity in his setup out of possession. But in possession, he'd play a lot more players closer together, slower build-up, which is very different to West Ham. You think of West Ham being quite direct, end-to-end. So, and this is kind of a thing we're seeing at the moment with a lot of these teams that are wanting to play attractive football or whatever, and they're all wanting to copy the top teams. But the issue is their identity as a club is completely different to that. So it's going to take time to adapt to that, and probably several new players as well. But I think he'll get a lot more out of the team because they've got a lot of quality in the team that isn't really being used much, and they like to spend. So I can imagine this signing someone in January as well. I think Bowen's out for a while, isn't he? So Kudus will probably replace him, but then you've then got to replace the other player in that in the front line. So maybe Fulkrug gets more minutes. Maybe they buy a new striker or something. But I think generally they should be fine. He'll get more wins for them. I think they'll still lose badly occasionally. But I do, like Nigel was saying, them bottom two, you worry for them more than anyone. Southampton actually, I do slightly less than Leicester. I think their manager might be able to nick points off a couple of teams. I think the way how he plays, Ivan Juric, he's quite good actually, and he did really well in Serie A. So it'll be interesting to see what he does. But yeah, it's a tough league, and I think even like Ipswich, Wolves, basically every team just above the bottom two have looked good enough to get wins, whereas the bottom two don't. So I can just see them pulling away at some point. But yeah, let's see.
Nigel, when you look at the roster that Potter's inheriting, you have names such as Bowen, who's obviously going to be out for at least a few weeks with the foot injury. But outside of that, you got players like Kilman, Wan-Bissaka, Paquetá, Kudus. You know, you have players who have Soler, who friend of the show, who's looked really good in the moments that he plays. You know, I kind of feel like he's one of a perfect player for a system under Graham Potter. How do you see him, Somerville? You know, these players, like, how do you see the people that they have being able to fit into the way that Potter likes to play?
Well, Potter's a chameleon. That's a big thing. Potter will play whatever system he sees fit to win a game. He chops and changes. He don't play a single system. He's also someone who can adapt to players brought in by a director, a sporting director, technical director. So he'll choose what he sees fit on the day, and I think that's something what we couldn't get the grasp of at Chelsea, why it failed there, but it's something what he had in working brilliantly when I was at Brighton, which is why I was shocked at the time that I know that Manchester United were really interested in him at one point. I am shocked that we didn't actually return there and have another look, because he can get the best out of some of these players at West Ham, who Lopetegui is really. Somerville's a big one. I think he's hardly got a sniff. He's hardly got a chance, and I think Potter will get the best out of him. Somerville, the ones around the fringes, Somerville, Fulkrug. I mean, Alvarez has not been brilliant. Dominguez, is it Dominguez? Dominguez the one, isn't it? Who they got in the midfield? Who's not been
Rodriguez.
Rodriguez. I just think they'll get the best. I think they'll get the best out of them. I think Potter will get the best out of them. I genuinely see West Ham being a decent side for the second half of the season under Potter. He'll just make them. He'll make them more compact. He'll make them stronger. They'll surprise a few people on the days, so they might turn up to an Arsenal or turn up to a Liverpool and set up completely different to how they have done for the previous few weeks, because that's what Potter does. He'll select a game plan and system what he thinks can get a point.
And you know, I think this highlights the precarious part and pace in the table of Man United and Spurs, right? Because Spurs are on 24, Man United and West Ham are on 23. So you bring in a new manager who's going to play more positive football, hopefully get them some more goals. West Ham have only scored 24 goals this season. Not great. And next thing you know, they're up in the 10th-ish, right? They could easily make a couple leaps. And you're Spurs and you're Man United and you're in 14th or 15th. Like Palace are on 21 points. It takes one. If they win their next game, Palace could jump ahead of. You're looking at Man United in 15th place. That's certainly not where they want to be with the aspirations that club has. Same with Spurs. So, like I said, it could get worse before it gets better for both of those teams. Let's take a look at the FA Cup third round as we do all things domestic football in England. So let's take a look. We got some pretty good matchups in the FA Cup third round. We have Aston Villa hosting West Ham of the Premier League teams. Two Premier League teams coming together. We have Forest with Luton. Luton having dropped down into the Championship this past season after their sole season in the Premier League. And then I think you have what many would consider to be the marquee matchup of the weekend, which is Arsenal hosting Man United. So let's start at the beginning. Nigel, do you think that what do you see for the Aston Villa West Ham game? Do you think Unai's going to rotate heavy? Do you think Potter's going to go super strong?
I think that'll be a genuine Premier League match. I think it'll be a genuine Premier League matchup where we get two teams who are really going to go for it. And genuinely, that's what I see. I think it's one of them as well, where it could lay a foundation for West Ham. It could lay a foundation, and for Unai Emery, he really needs this. He needs this because they need to build on that little bit of momentum what they've just got back. I think they had one win in something like 10 games, and then they just got that back, didn't they? And they need to build on it. So I think both managers need it. Potter for his new manager bounce and get his feet under the table, and Emery to try to keep that momentum building.
Yeah, that should be an interesting one. Ben, any thoughts on West Ham, Aston Villa for this weekend?
Yeah, just same thing really. I think West Ham definitely they'll go full strength. Villa's probably got a bit more depth. They can probably rotate a little bit more, but they need to get a result there. And these are the type of teams as well where I know Villa might be thinking more about the league and trying to get in the Champions League because they've got a genuine chance of getting it back into Europe, and who knows how high after that. But that gets them more money than going all the way to the final of the FA Cup. Whereas for West Ham, they might be thinking, you know what, actually, we're not going to get to Europe, but wouldn't mind a cup semi-final or go all the way and get, win the FA Cup. I think, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the smaller Premier League teams don't take the cups serious enough sometimes. Then again, when Arsenal played West Ham last season, that wasn't the case. They went all out. They're the full strength team, but I don't know. There's just sometimes where, because of how much money is in the Premier League now, they prioritise the money over the going for a Carabao Cup or FA Cup. But at the end of the day, that's what the fans want to see. They want to be in finals or semi-finals and going to Wembley and then going and winning a trophy. So
it's a tough dichotomy, right? Because the prize money, even for making one place above in the Premier League, is way more than what you win for winning the FA Cup, right? So money talks, right? That's the long and the short of it. With Villa, they do have some players who are out. It's going to be interesting to see how they cope with this next set of fixtures. They have Everton next, so they'll be the next victim of Everton in the league, and then they play Arsenal. They have some Champions League games. It's going to be a like you were saying, Nigel, and getting back to form for them, trying to get back on the horse of winning after a few winless games. Aston Villa definitely have a point to prove, and Unai loves his cup competitions. So moving into Arsenal, Man United, Nigel, what do you got for me? We have Amorim coming to the Emirates,
for
the second time, yes, after what I would think would be a draw that made them feel good, though, right? It was a positive draw in that sense. How do you think that they're going to approach this game, and do you think that they have what it takes to beat Arsenal at home?
I think we'll try doing the same thing as what we did last time, because Amorim is kind of set in his ways. He's a bit like Ange, where this is how we do it, mate. And I think it'll be the same result. I think Arsenal win 2-0.
All right, 2-0 to the Arsenal. One thing that I was thinking about that I forgot to mention for the game we were just talking about, the Aston Villa West Ham game, is, I think obviously there's like the whole new manager bounce thing, and I think so much of that has to do with non-footballing reasons, right? Like, you're in a toxic workplace. the person who's your boss is either that they're incompetent, or they know they're incompetent, or you both know that they're incompetent, right? And you're continuing to show up to work, and you're continuing to have to listen to this person who's obviously not doing very good at their job. Or sometimes, genuinely, sometimes the players are really behind the manager, but there's another reason for the sacking. But nonetheless,
and has Tim Steidten gone as well today? Has he?
I think that was being rumored. I'm not sure if he had officially stepped down. It's leaking, but it's not official. But you have these environments that have, run their course, let's put it that way. And then you have somebody in who's bringing new energy. It's like they're not going to practice before the game tomorrow, right? So Graham Potter's going to show up with his coaches. He's going to shake everybody's hand. And it's going to be vibes, right? It seems like these who I think the best players are, like, everybody's get a fresh start. Like, let's go out and give it a go, right? And I think that's a big reason of why you see the new manager bounce, is just that fresh energy and giving people hope that it's not going to keep going like it's going. So that's going to be another interesting angle, and some potentially freedom in roles and stuff like that. But Ben, as you look at the Arsenal Man U game, do you think that Amorim's come far enough in the time?
Yeah, I think they've had some better performances. I do think that Liverpool one is going to be a bit like paper over cracks type thing, where they start to think that they're in a lot better situation than they are, and if we were to beat them, then that might, get like they remember what it was before and how they were feeling before. But I don't know. I think one of the issues with Amorim, the thing I said with him is, like, I think he's the right manager, but bringing him mid-season, and he's got such a different approach, and they don't have the players for it. It's not a very smart move there. I would have either gone all in for him in the summer or wait till the next summer, because now you've got a squad of players who don't fully fit the system, and then they've not got enough time. He's not got enough time to work with them between each game. So yeah, but I think generally they'll set up defensively. It's quite solid. Try and limit the chances as much as possible, and then try and hit on the counter. That approach is how he'll go. And the only issue from an Arsenal point of view is we keep drawing the big teams early on in the cups. It's really frustrating because, like, in the other cup, we got to play like the young players and the fringe players, but now you're like, we literally can't rotate in this game. And if we do, we're talking like 2 or 3, like the keeper or something. Maybe Neto will finally make his debut before he probably gets sent back to Bournemouth or whatever, so we can get some random shitty loan in. But yeah, no, it's a weird one, because we've already got so many injuries, and I'm like, who are you going to rotate with? You've just got a few youth players, and it's a lot throwing them into this game. But yeah, so let's see. But I think we can still get a result, and it would definitely help the feel around the club right now, because I think everyone's very flat or very annoyed. So to get a win against Man United, it would actually be the 5th win in a row against them, which would be like unheard of. So that would be really nice. But the same can be said the other way. If we lose and that run ends, then we're not signing anyone. It could get ugly quite quickly.
It can do. It can.
Yeah, and I think the next 3 games for Arsenal are going to be not season defining in the way that like you're not going to make Champions League, or you know what I mean, but season defining in the way that the fans feel about it, I think is really Arsenal are hosting Man United. They're in the FA Cup. They're hosting Spurs in the Premier League, and they're hosting Villa in the Premier League. Those are Arsenal's next 3 matches in the next 8-9 days, right? So 9 days from now, we could either be sitting here in the next round of the FA Cup and potentially, whatever, 6 or fewer points behind Liverpool, or you could be in the mud, right? Knocked out of the FA Cup, 2 down in the League Cup against Newcastle, having to go back to St. James's Park, and then potentially having lost the North London derby and a Unai derby, and heads would be on the moon, right? And do I think that's what's going to happen? No, but I'm saying like these are the periods in the season that one you pick out before the season starts, right? You're like this block of games is going to be really important, and then as the season progresses, either those fixtures gain importance or they lose importance as the title as you move, right? And I think this block of fixtures, the draw comes out, we have Man U. And then we get closer and closer and closer, and it just seems like the stakes are going up and up and up. So if you're Mikel Arteta, Nigel, you're coming into the changing room before the Man United match. Obviously, I think from an analysis point of view, right, you've had Ben in the lab for the last however long since we've played Man United, picking apart the game. I think there were certain things that Man United did that were very clever in terms of who and how they pressed in the match at the Emirates. But you're coming in to make that talk before the game, Nigel. What's your message?
Message is simple. It's a season on the line, and I don't think that's a joke. I think it is a season on the line. Win on Sunday, and you're through to the next round. Confidence into the North London derby, and all that bad negative energy, what's been bubbling around for 3 days from Brighton into Newcastle, has gone. And that's a big thing. That's a big thing. I always said, if you fall off the horse, you've got to jump back on it as soon as you can. And Arsenal have been one of them teams they've tended to take 2 games or 3 games to get back on the horse, and now is not the time to take that long. It's a time for you to jump straight back on it.
Ben, what's your lineup if you're Mikel and you're starting the lineup? This is obviously an all Arsenal episode today, boys. So lock in if you're with us, and if you're not, maybe we'll see you next week. But Ben, as you set up the team, you're Mikel. You're picking the team for this weekend. Obviously it's the FA Cup. Arsenal have a history of giving chances to youth players. We have a youth player who you could say is going to be given a chance, which is Miles Lewis-Skelly at left back. Do you try to bring in another youth player, maybe on the bench, or to make a starting appearance, or do you go as strong as you possibly can? Who's your lineup for this weekend?
Yeah, I'm just thinking because I'm just thinking who could necessarily come in. I think Neto will start in goal, so that's gets in. That's the first win of the game. Then the thing is, we've got Zinchenko and Tierney, who've been on the bench a lot recently, but I would also like to see Lewis-Skelly start. Part of me would love to see him play in midfield, but I don't think that will happen in this game. Maybe if it was a smaller team, that would have happened. So I'd probably say we'd start with Lewis-Skelly. In fact, no, I'll say Zinchenko, because I think Lewis-Skelly will probably come on because he's played a lot recently. Zinchenko hasn't started and hasn't really come on. And he's played well against Man United before. They're probably going to be sat quite low, have quite a low block, so it'll help. Then I'll say Kiwior, probably Saliba, because there's no one on the right side. and then Timber. So you've got your normal right side. Maybe Marino in midfield with Jorginho. You rest Rice and Partey, something like that. The third one's a bit difficult because I'm thinking Odegaard didn't look fit recently, and I think he needs.
He looked cooked.
Yeah, he needs to be rested, but I don't know who else can play there. With
no Waneri, right? Yeah. He would be the player who you'd bring in.
Yeah, so maybe we switch to a 4, so a 2 and then a 4, and then you play Trossard and Havertz. We might end up doing that again, or actually not Trossard and Havertz. Maybe play Jesus and Havertz, Trossard, and Martinelli as the front 4. I'm not very inspired by that at all. I would probably saying that actually swap Jorginho for Rice because you need legs.
Yeah, I think you have to start Rice. I think this is he's been on a good vein of form. He's starting to look fit again. I think he's one of those players that can play every 3 or 4 days, that wants to play every 3 or 4 days, and maybe you just don't load up his legs with the minutes, right? Maybe you get him 60 in this one, you get him off, and then he plays 90 against Spurs, and you're going to play him 90 against Villa. I think actually the Jorginho-Rice partnership is one of my favorites, low-key, because Jorginho can give you that vertical passing, can give you that creativity when he's on his game. And when Arsenal have the ball, which I think they will do against Man United at home, right? Jorginho can orchestrate. He has that leadership in telling people what to do and them doing it. And then he's also brave enough to play the balls over the top, play those aggressive passes to start to unlock some of those positions. So I would go Jorginho, Rice, double pivot. I would go probably get Kivior in there, play one of Saliba or Gabriel, Lewis Skelly at left back. And then, ultimately you're probably looking at Timber at right back again. There's no really other options there. Forwards, again, you're light on forwards, right? Maybe you start a Sterling. It's been frustrating. I was talking about it earlier that we haven't seen Sterling at all. Obviously, he got hurt, right? So he's coming back from the injury. Maybe he has enough to play a half or 60 minutes, maybe. But if he's not full fitness, then you can't really risk it, right, against this team. And again, we've talked about a lot, Ahmad running down the wings. Like, do you want to play a half-cooked Sterling against those guys who have the pace and, ultimately can do some damage? So it's definitely going to be an interesting one coming up. Let's take a look at – that's the FA Cup. The next thing that we'll be seeing before we come back and talk again next week is match week 21. So that's next midweek games. Brentford hosting Man City, Chelsea, Bournemouth, which I think will be a really interesting matchup. Potter's first match in charge in the Premier League as West Ham hosts Fulham. Forest hosting Liverpool, which could be honestly a top of the league 6-pointer right there. As I hate that term, but it is what it is. Everton hosting Aston Villa for the first time since their manager has gotten changed. Then obviously Leicester hosting Crystal Palace. Nigel, as you mentioned before, Palace are on a good run of form. Leicester have been looking really dreadful. Newcastle hosts Wolves. Spurs go to the Emirates to face Arsenal in the midweek game. Ipswich, Brighton, and Man United, Southampton rounding out the midweek matches. Nigel, which ones stick out to you?
I've been looking at FA Cup games. I've been looking at FA Cup games and picking out giant killings, but we've skipped into match week 21.
That's all right. If we have time, then we can give me your giant killings and give me your double chances. There's no double chance in the FA Cup because
there is.
Are we still doing replays?
Yeah, we still do replays.
Get in double chance for the FA Cup third round.
I like QPR at Leicester.
Oh yeah, that's happening.
I like QPR at Leicester. I also think Norwich is a good shout against Brighton at home. And I think Oxford are going to win away at Exeter. I know that's not a giant killing, but I think they're a long odds bet, Oxford. And the other one, what I was looking at, if I was Southampton manager, I would be terrified of playing Swansea because you don't know what Swansea's going to turn up. And it's one of them games where you look at it and you think, Swansea are a box of rebels, and Southampton don't know how to get a win. So is it one of them where they could go and get a draw, or maybe a win? It's one of them. But yeah, QPR at Leicester and Norwich at home to Brighton. I think where we might see two big teams come unstuck. The other one, what I've been looking at, and I'm tempted. I am tempted to think that I think both teams will definitely score in West Brom versus Bournemouth. It depends what team Bournemouth put out against West Brom.
Ben?
Yeah.
What players are you going to be looking for? I know you like to find yourself an obscure player to watch that maybe nobody's ever heard of. So maybe a couple names that you're going to be looking for this weekend in the FA Cup.
I'm just looking at which games I might end up watching. There's two derbies. There's Leeds Harrogate and then City Salford. Those would be interesting. Because if one goal goes in for the other team, it's Harrogate or Salford, they'll go mental. Even if it's 8-1, like even if it's 8-0 and then they get a goal at the end, there'll be limbs in the corner somewhere. But yeah, no, I'm not sure. I'm just thinking Sunderland Stoke is probably one I might watch because there's a few at Sunderland. They've got Chris Rigg, Joe Bellingham, Tommy Watson, and it'll be interesting to see if Enzo Lefebvre. I don't know if that's been announced yet, but he's
yeah.
Is it? Oh, okay. But yeah, so if he gets a game, that'll be interesting. And then it's Stoke. They've got a few as well. They've got a winger I spoke about before called Million Manhoef, who's really good, and a midfielder called Sol Sidibe, plays for England youth teams. He's been linked with Premier League teams as well. He's really good. And not spoken about as much as other championship talents, but I think he's only like 17, 18. But he's playing it week out. So I think he's probably one that if he stays at Stoke next season, he'll have a big season, and then everyone will be like, oh, who's this guy, But yeah, Chris Rigg is the standout one there. And then another interesting one, I'd say Middlesbrough Blackburn, because they're both doing quite well in the championship. And again, with players, I'm thinking at Middlesbrough, it depends what they'll do because they might want to rotate, but they've got like Ben Doak, who a lot of Premier League team, Palace, I think we're bidding. Who was the other team as well? Was it Ipswich, I think? They probably won't now because they've got Jadon Philogene. But Palace were trying to get Ben Doak off. He's on loan from Liverpool. So he'll be interesting because from Liverpool's point of view, it's quite weird. They've actually got a really good academy, but they're all scattered throughout the EFL. Actually, one at Stoke, Kumas as well. It's those two mainly that they've got on loan in the championship that are doing really well. So it'll be, interesting because they sometimes just like sell them to fund other transfers. But I think he's their main one, But yeah.
Sunderland and Stoke, who have played just a few days ago, they played on the 29th of December. Yeah. Stoke with a late winner in stoppage time. Rigg was not participating in that match. He will be back for the match this weekend. So, should be an interesting game. That's probably one I'll try to catch in terms of the teams that have players in the championship that, might be making moves here in the next transfer window. Nigel?
There's a strike as well. I just thought I forgot to mention Wilson It's City or something like that. I think he scored in that game. He's really good as well. Sunderland, they're full of players like that. I actually think they've got the best. I don't know, say best squad, but in terms of like the depth of young players, they're just full of like really good, talented young players that in a few years could all be really good. So yeah,
Sunderland currently on 50 points and in 4th place in the championship, just 2 points shy of Burnley and Sheffield United. Nigel?
I was just going to say, I think Stoke Ben touched on the midfielders, Suleiman Sidibe and Junho Bai is the other one, the Korean. He's really good. Came from Daewon Blue Wings, I think it is. And he's hit the ground running. He's been really good for him. So yeah, he's one of. I mean, the other game. The game what I'm probably going to keep an eye on the most on Saturday is going to be Forest Luton. Rob Edwards has just quit at Luton, so they're going to go with no manager to Forest. Do Forest rest players
quit or forced out or like legitimately?
Well, I don't know. But do Forest rest players now that they're playing Liverpool in midweek?
I think so. I think Forest can afford to. They've got a big squad as well, haven't they?
But Luton, on their day, can turn up and can do something. Carlton Morris gets it on. They can be a good side. But yeah, that's the one. What could be a bit of a bomb burner. That depending on what happens there.
All right, let's take 2 minutes. Let's touch on. I mean, obviously, it's going to be North London Derby, right? That's the match of the week. You have a very interesting one at Stamford Bridge, Bournemouth heading up to Chelsea. Nigel, are Arsenal going to beat Spurs?
Yes, and Brentford are going to beat Man City, and Bournemouth will get a point at Chelsea, and Forest will get a point against Liverpool, and Everton will beat Villa, and Palace will beat Leicester, and Newcastle will beat Wolves, and Ipswich and Brighton will draw, and the battle of the 2 worst form teams, Man United will hammer Southampton.
You heard it here first, team. Thanks for joining us, boys. It was great to see you guys again. Ben, back after a long-awaited absence. It's going to be a fun one. We got another round of the Cup this week. We have North London Derby at the midweek. I'll talk to you guys after the North London Derby, essentially, and we'll see where things stand. So thanks for joining us today. Like, follow, subscribe. Here, put your moment of the week in the comments, and we'll see you next time.